Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Lincoln Harris. I'm 36 years old. And this isn't the story I thought I'd be telling at this point in my life. Right now, I'm sitting on the porch of a modest bee farm in Oregon, surrounded by golden sunlight and the gentle buzz of 1,000 tiny wings. There's peace here. But the road that brought me to this moment was soaked in betrayal, grief, and a rage I tried for years to bury. It all began in a suburb just outside Eugene. Our house wasn't special, 2 stories, peeling white paint, creaky wooden stairs, but I used to think it held love. I was wrong. My father, Roger Harris, worked at a bank. You'd think that meant stability. It didn't. He wore suits that cost more than our mortgage and treated everyone like they owed him something. Cold. Calculated. Always watching like you were a failed investment. My mother, Elise, lived in another world. Shopping trips, brunches, and expensive hair appointments, paid for, more often than not, by credit cards in my name. That's not an exaggeration. She once stole my SSN to open a department store card. I had a little brother, Micah. 4 years younger. Smart, kind, and always trying to bridge the divide between me and our parents. But even he couldn't glue together what was always cracked. When I turned 18, I enlisted. Not because I was patriotic, but because I needed out. I needed a reason to matter. The army gave me discipline, but it took a lot too. I served 3 tours. Iraq. Afghanistan. I saw things I still can't talk about without shaking. But the worst wounds weren't visible. Not until I came home and saw how my parents had used me. I sent every penny I could home, thinking it would help. I imagined they'd use it to pay off debts, help Micah with college. Instead, they used it for cruise vacations and to upgrade their SUV. When I came home after a near-fatal injury, leg gone from the knee down, there was no welcome sign. No hug. Just my mother's lips pursed in discomfort and my father's cold remark, "So what now? You're just gonna lie around and collect disability?" At first, I stayed quiet. Thought maybe they were just overwhelmed. I did chores, cooked, cleaned. Gave them most of my pension. Micah was away at college, and I didn't want to burden him with what was happening at home. But everything changed on Christmas Eve 2 years ago. I'd spent weeks saving up my VA payments, even skipped meals to buy them gifts. A necklace for my mom. A vintage watch for my dad. Wrapped them in gold paper and placed them gently under the tree. When the time came, I handed them over with a smile. My mother opened hers and scoffed. "Is this real gold?" My father didn't even bother trying on the watch. He set it down like it was trash. Then, in front of the whole family, uncles, cousins, even Micah, who had come home for the holidays, he stood up and said, "Lincoln, you're a burden. You're not contributing. You just eat and sleep and take up space. Maybe it's time you leave." There was silence. Micah's fork clattered to his plate. I was shaking. My prosthetic leg burned like it had caught fire. But my father wasn't done. "You should have died over there," he muttered. "At least then, you wouldn't be our problem." Micah shouted something. My mother tried to quiet him. But I didn't hear them. All I heard was the echo of that sentence, "You should have died over there." So I stood. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just said, "You'll regret this." And I walked out into the snow, alone. But that was the last day I ever allowed myself to feel like a victim. That was the day the plan for justice was born. The night I left my parents' house, I didn't know where I was going. Just that I had to go. I walked for nearly 3 hours through the snow, prosthetic leg aching with every step, until I reached the edge of town and collapsed on a bus stop bench. I didn't care where the next bus was headed. I just needed to disappear. A few days later, I found myself in a dingy motel on the outskirts of Bend, Oregon. I paid cash for a week. The room smelled like mold and regret. A single light flickered above the bed, and the heater groaned like it was begging for mercy. I sat on the mattress, still wearing the same clothes from Christmas, staring at the floor as if it might give me answers. I'd served 3 tours. Fought in sandstorms. Survived IED blasts. Lost brothers in arms. Lost my leg. But nothing hurt more than hearing my own father, my blood, wish I hadn't come back. I kept thinking, why did I survive, just to be discarded like trash by the people I gave everything to? I spiraled. The VA clinic was hours away, and I couldn't afford the trip. My meds were running low. The panic attacks came fast and without warning. Loud trucks outside the motel would jolt me into flashbacks. I'd throw myself to the floor, covering my ears, waiting for the explosions to stop. I went hungry. I lost weight. I avoided the mirror. I didn't want to see the man I'd become, a broken veteran with no home, no purpose, and a heart full of rage that had nowhere to go. Micah tried to call. I ignored him. I didn't want his pity. I didn't want anyone's. Especially not after the newspaper article I saw a week later. There they were, my parents. Roger and Elise Harris. Posing in front of their newly renovated kitchen for a local home and garden piece, smiling like royalty. My father was quoted as saying, "It's important to create a home where everyone feels valued and inspired." I stared at the photo for hours. They had used my pension, my sacrifice, to build their dream. Then they kicked me out like an old dog they didn't want to feed anymore. That was the moment something in me broke. But it wasn't the kind of break that leaves you helpless. It was the kind that makes you dangerous. I wasn't going to let them win. I reached out to the only person I had left. My grandfather, Henry. My father's father. A quiet man who lived on a modest bee farm out in rural Oregon. He hadn't been part of our lives much, not because he didn't care, but because my father had pushed him out years ago. Said he was too simple, too country. But I remembered Henry from childhood. He smelled like smoke and wildflowers, always had dirt under his nails and honey in his beard. And when I was 10 and my parents forgot my birthday, he drove 3 hours just to bring me a hand-carved wooden train set. I took a chance. I called. "Grandpa," I said, voice trembling. I need a place to stay." He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Come on home, son. My door's always open." I arrived at his place 2 days later. He picked me up from the station in an old blue pickup that sounded like it was running on sheer willpower. When he saw me, limping, unshaven, gaunt, he didn't say a word. Just wrapped me in the kind of hug that makes your chest cave in and your throat catch fire. "You'll be all right here," he said. And for the first time in months, I believed someone. The farm was peaceful, beehives nestled among tall pines, the hum of life in the air. Henry had built it with his own hands. "The bees are family," he told me. "They don't abandon each other when one gets hurt. They protect the weak." I wanted to cry when he said that. But I just nodded. At night, I lay awake in the guest room, the smell of honey and cedar in the air, trying to make sense of my life. Trying not to replay Christmas dinner in my head like a cruel movie stuck on repeat. Henry never pushed. Never asked what happened. He just gave me something to do. Fixing hives. Painting old fences. Sorting jars of honey. Each task pulled me back into the present. Each day chipped away at the rage, the shame, the bitterness. But beneath it all, a question kept rising in my chest like smoke. How do I forgive the people who nearly destroyed me? And the answer came one morning, as I watched the bees swirl above the fields. I don't. I don't forgive them. I make sure they understand what they lost. I make them watch as I rebuild everything without them, and leave them behind for good. Not with fists. Not with rage. But with something more powerful. Success. Legacy. Truth. And that's when the idea for revenge began to take shape, not as fire, but as honey. The weeks passed quietly at Grandpa Henry's farm. I was slowly gaining strength, inside and out. My prosthetic still ached in the mornings, but my body moved with more purpose. The bees had become my therapy. I could spend hours just watching them fly in and out of their hives, their lives filled with structure and community, the very things I'd lost. One crisp morning, after loading up honey jars for the local farmer's market, Grandpa handed me an old wooden box. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. "What's this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Thought it was time. It's all yours." Inside were folders, ledgers, photographs, even some handwritten letters bound in string. Most of it was records from when Grandpa tried to expand the farm in the late 1990s. I started reading the papers, and halfway through one of the folders, I froze. It was a legal document, handwritten and notarized. A will. And it changed everything. My grandfather had legally transferred ownership of the farm to my father 20 years ago, with the condition that if Roger ever abandoned or mistreated any family member who came to the farm seeking shelter, the deed would revert back to Grandpa. At the time, it meant nothing. Roger never lived on the farm. He just ignored it, thought it beneath him. But here's the twist, Grandpa never revoked that contract. And when I showed up, wounded, broken, needing shelter, and was taken in by Grandpa while being shunned by my own parents, Roger had, unknowingly, triggered the clause. Legally, the farm was no longer just a refuge. It was leverage. Grandpa looked at me after I finished reading. "You see what that means?" I nodded slowly. "It means I'm not just your guest anymore. I'm entitled." "You're more than entitled, Lincoln. You're the rightful heir to this land, this business, and this future. Your father gave it up when he gave you up." I sat there stunned, the gravity of it sinking in. The same man who told me I was a burden, had just forfeited the one thing he could have passed down. His legacy. It wasn't his anymore. It was mine. Later that day, I opened Grandpa's old desktop computer and did some digging. I knew my parents were still active in the community, clinging to their social image. My father was part of a homeowners board. My mother did charity brunches. But what I didn't expect to find was just how badly they had mismanaged their finances. Their new kitchen. Paid for by a third mortgage. Their car. Leased in Micah's name without him knowing. Their credit score. Ruined. And here's the kicker, my father had quietly applied for a loan, planning to flip this very bee farm. He had plans drafted for bulldozing the land and turning it into a wedding venue. He even pitched the idea to a local investor. But the deal was stalled because the investor required updated title documents, which Grandpa had never signed. I laughed bitterly. The man who said I was a burden, had been planning to profit from the very land that was healing me. But now I held all the cards. That night, I sat on the porch with Grandpa, watching the sun dip behind the trees. "I want to keep the farm," I said. "Grow it. Honor it." He nodded, sipping his tea. "It's yours, Lincoln. But I get the feeling that's not all you're planning." I smiled. "I'm not going to scream, or sue, or show up at their house yelling. That's what they'd expect. I'm going to do something better." Grandpa raised an eyebrow. "Better?" "I'm going to build something so visible, so undeniable, that they'll be forced to watch me thrive without them. And then, when they come crawling back, because they will, I'll be ready." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up sketching ideas, mind racing. A brand. A business. A legacy. Not just a farm, but a movement. Coleman Honey. Premium. Organic. Veteran-owned. I'd use my story, not the details, but the heart of it, to build something real. Something that inspired people. Something that gave meaning to everything I'd lost. The idea was simple: show the world what resilience looks like. Use the pain they gave me to create something beautiful. Something buzzing with life. And the best part? My parents would have front row seats to it all. They'd see my face in the paper. On local TV. On jars at the grocery store they could barely afford to shop in. And they'd know. I didn't just survive. I evolved. I woke up the next morning with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was more than motivation, it was purpose. I had a plan now. Not fueled by hate or bitterness, but by vision. If my parents thought I was a burden, I was going to make being a burden look like the most profitable decision of my life. First, I sat down with Grandpa and showed him the roadmap. He wasn't a man of many words, but when I finished, he nodded, then stood up, walked to the kitchen, and brought out a dusty bottle of cider. "We save this for special occasions," he said, setting down 2 glasses. "Today, we toast to beginnings." I started with branding. I called it Coleman Honey, using my middle name, not Harris. That part of me was gone. The old name, the family name, was awound. Coleman felt honest. Rooted. Like something I could be proud of. I designed a logo myself, a honeybee hovering over a field of pine trees, with a ribbon underneath that read. Handcrafted. Healed. Homegrown. Then came the digital front. I built a basic website and started an Instagram account. My first post was a photo of me and Grandpa, standing beside a hive at sunrise, smoke wafting into golden morning light. The caption. From broken to buzzing. My name is Lincoln. I lost a lot, but I found purpose among the bees. This is Coleman Honey. This is home. I didn't expect much. But within a week, the post had over 2,000 likes. People began DMing me, veterans, trauma survivors, young farmers. They weren't just interested in honey. They were interested in hope. In redemption. That was when I realized something. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be luminous. I reinvested every dime of my VA check into the farm. Grandpa and I expanded our operations, added 10 new hives, upgraded the extraction equipment, and created hand-poured beeswax candles with simple packaging and a raw elegance that matched the product. We started offering healing hive tours, where visitors could come and walk the grounds, learn about bees, and hear my story. I didn't go into detail, but I made sure people understood the core message. This isn't just about honey. This is about rising after falling. Each visitor left with a small jar etched with the words. You are not a burden. The phrase caught fire online. Veterans groups started sharing it. A therapist in Portland reached out and asked to feature us in a short documentary about trauma recovery through agriculture. A local organic grocery store picked up our products for their shelves. And then came the moment I had been quietly waiting for. One of our honey jars ended up on the desk of a woman named Rebecca Ames, an investor who also happened to be the same woman my father had pitched his failed wedding venue scheme to. She emailed us personally. I passed on a project like this years ago from someone else. Glad to see it went to the right hands. I'd love to talk growth. I couldn't stop smiling. That night, I sat on the porch with Grandpa, sipping cider again. Grandpa, I said, how do you feel about turning this place into a small brand with a national presence? He grinned. I always knew these bees would take flight one day. Just didn't think they'd carry you with them. But as the buzz grew, so did the ripples. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Micah. He sounded breathless. Lincoln, they saw the TV spot. Mom and Dad. They're freaking out. About what? You. The farm. The business. You're on the news, man. You're in the papers. Mom actually cried when she saw that quote on the jar. I stayed quiet for a second. Then asked, "What did Dad say?" Micah hesitated. He said, "That ungrateful cripple thinks he can cut us out of our own legacy." I laughed. That's when it clicked. They thought Coleman Honey was theirs. Because of the land. Because of the bloodline. Because they believed my pain had been their property. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Grandpa had already filed the updated deed, transferring full legal ownership to me 3 weeks earlier. He'd done it quietly, without telling them. And now, legally, financially, publicly, I was the legacy. And soon, the world would know it too. I didn't need to shout or storm into their house with receipts and lawyers. That's not how real revenge works. Real revenge is silent. Surgical. It moves like bees in the wind, quiet, relentless, and with a sting that leaves a mark you don't forget. The plan was simple: use the truth and let their own greed undo them. It started with the documentary. Rebecca Ames connected me with a small production team out of Portland. They filmed me walking through the fields, tending the hives, and speaking about trauma, recovery, and legacy. I didn't name names, but I didn't need to. I said things like, "Sometimes, the people closest to you will call you a burden. But burdens bloom into strength when you plant them in the right soil." The video went viral on Facebook. Then YouTube. Then LinkedIn of all places. By the end of the month, we'd gotten over 120,000 views. And that's when the Oregon Journal reached out. They wanted to do a full-length feature. The article hit the Sunday front page with the headline, "From Wounded Soldier to Beekeeper CEO, How Lincoln Coleman Turned His Pain into a Purpose." There I was, full color. My prosthetic leg visible. Grandpa beside me, hands on my shoulder. Our bees in the background, golden light pouring over the hives. Inside the article, they mentioned the Harris family. Just once. A small paragraph. After being turned away by his parents following a war injury, Lincoln found refuge with his grandfather on a small bee farm. What began as survival has now grown into a regional business inspiring thousands. That one paragraph was all it took. Micah called me again. "They're losing it. Dad says he's being harassed at work." Someone taped the article to his office door. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The next move was something I had planned for months. A fundraiser. I launched a veteran support initiative through the Coleman Honey brand, offering farm internships and trauma-informed workshops for vets transitioning out of service. But here's the twist. I reached out to local businesses for sponsors, including one particular event planning company in Eugene. The same one that had been in talks with my father about using the farm land for his luxury wedding venue. I offered them a partnership to host Bees and Brotherhood, a one-day retreat for veterans and their families. I provided the venue, the experience, and all the product. All I asked in return was that they list Coleman Honey Farm as the sole location sponsor, and place our banner across the entire site. They agreed. The press came. And guess who showed up for a photo op? My mother. In a wide-brimmed hat and a fake smile, she stood at the edge of the event with 2 of her church friends. I could see her staring from across the field, eyes darting, lips twitching. She didn't approach. But I saw her whisper something to a reporter. Later, I found out she tried to tell them she had supported her son through everything. That she helped him start the farm. The reporter, bless her, already knew the truth. She'd read the article. Seen the documents. She politely told my mother, "That's not what Mr. Coleman said. And I believe this farm legally belongs to him." Boom. Checkmate. That night, as we packed up folding chairs and leftover jars of honey, Grandpa slapped my back and chuckled. "That was one hell of a move, Lincoln. I smiled, sweat on my brow, feeling more alive than I had in years. It's not about revenge anymore, I said. It's about reclaiming what they tried to take. Grandpa raised an eyebrow. And what was that? My name. My worth. My story. A few days later, Micah drove down to visit again. He brought a gift, a framed newspaper clipping of the article, now laminated. You should hang this in the shop, he said. I looked at it, at my name bold and clear in the headline, and nodded. Then he added, also. Dad tried to take out another loan. He listed the farm as potential collateral. The bank denied him. Said the title was under someone else's name. I grinned. That someone else is me. Micah laughed. I told him to stop embarrassing himself. I looked at my little brother, the kid who once stood back at Christmas while I was humiliated, and saw how much he'd grown. Not just in height. In spine. You always had my back, I told him. Even when you couldn't show it. I'm here now, he said. That's what matters. I thought I had the high ground. I thought the war was over. But betrayal doesn't always knock. Sometimes it slides in through a door you thought was locked. It started with a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter, handwritten, in my mother's cursive, the same one she used to write notes in my school lunches, before she started calling me a burden. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, but the moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. I opened it slowly. I don't know why, curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I still hoped some part of her regretted what she said that Christmas. But what I read. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. Lincoln. I know what you're doing. Don't think you can rewrite history and get away with it. Your grandfather's mind isn't what it used to be, and we both know that farm was always meant to go to your father. You may have tricked him into signing papers, but we can prove he wasn't of sound mind. We've hired an attorney. You have 30 days to vacate the property, or face a lawsuit for elder exploitation. I stood there frozen, the paper trembling in my hands. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after they abandoned me, ignored me, mocked me, they were now trying to accuse me of manipulating Grandpa. This wasn't just cruel. It was war. I took the letter inside and showed it to Grandpa. His face was calm, but his hands tightened around his teacup. I figured they'd try something eventually, he muttered. Your father always did value land more than love. They're saying you're not of sound mind, Grandpa. He laughed, a deep, gravelly sound. Son, I've been out here tending bees and balancing books for 30 years. I may forget my reading glasses, but I know damn well who I trust with my legacy. I nodded, but the damage was done. They were trying to strip everything away, from me, from him, from the community we'd built. Micah came down the next day, angrier than I'd ever seen him. They're serious, he said. They've already posted about it on Facebook, hinting at betrayal from within the family and manipulation of the elderly. They're painting you as a scam artist. The worst part? Some people believed them. A local paper picked up the drama, running a headline like it was some tabloid scandal. Veteran-run farm facing legal dispute from estranged parents. I was humiliated. But more than that, I was furious. This wasn't just about me now. This was about Grandpa. About our employees. Our customers. The veterans who came to our workshops and found healing in our hives. They were trying to destroy everything we built because they couldn't stand not owning it. But this time, I wasn't a scared soldier limping through their front door begging for warmth. I was a man with a business. A brand. A tribe. And a damn good lawyer. Rebecca Ames connected me with her firm's legal team. We filed a preemptive suit, defamation, interference with business contracts, and malicious intent to seize property. We also gathered medical records, footage of Grandpa working with bees, attending board meetings, writing checks, clear documentation of his mental acuity. But the best piece of evidence? A video. One I didn't even realize Micah had filmed months earlier, Grandpa sitting in the porch rocker, smiling as he signed the ownership papers, saying, "I'm proud to pass this land on to Lincoln. He earned it. Not just through blood, but through spirit." I uploaded the video to our Coleman Honey YouTube page with a heartfelt caption. It exploded. Thousands of comments poured in. "Your parents are a disgrace. This man is a hero." The calm dignity in his voice. I teared up. This is what legacy looks like. Sending this to every lawyer I know. Let's protect Lincoln. Public support was overwhelming. And my parents? They went silent. Micah later told me they'd received cease and desist letters from our legal team, and once they realized the public wasn't on their side, they dropped everything. But the damage they tried to cause? That stayed with me. It was a final reminder. They didn't want me. They just wanted control. And when they couldn't own my future, they tried to destroy it. But they failed. Not because I fought harder, but because I stood taller. And when you stand tall in the truth, even your enemies cast shadows at your feet. The lawsuit never made it to court. My parents, Roger and Elise, backed off the moment our legal counterattack landed. Maybe they realized they had no case. Or maybe, just maybe, they saw the tide had turned and their names were mud. Either way, it was over. I stood in the bee fields that morning, sun warming my face, bees weaving gold through the air. The land was still mine. Grandpa was still beside me. Our team was stronger than ever. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were thriving. In the months that followed, the Coleman Honey brand exploded. We expanded shipping to all 50 states. Opened an on-site shop with a honey tasting bar. Sarah, our head of tours, pitched the idea of beekeeping and healing retreats for veterans, and we got booked out months in advance. One day, a woman from a national morning talk show called. "We'd love to fly you to New York," she said. "Share your story. Talk about the healing power of bees and the strength of community." I politely declined. "I'd rather stay here," I said. "But if you want to film a segment in our fields, you're welcome anytime." She agreed. And when the segment aired, me in a flannel shirt, bees humming in the background, Grandpa smiling softly at my side, it didn't just go viral. It meant something. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees, I walked out to the porch where Grandpa rocked slowly in his chair. "Do you ever think about how different it all could have been?" I asked him. He took a sip of his tea. "Sometimes. But I think about how it turned out more." I nodded, feeling the breeze on my skin. "You gave me a second chance, Grandpa." "No," he said, looking at me with those steady, wise eyes. "You gave it to yourself. I just left the door open." Weeks later, Micah moved to the farm permanently. He left his job in the city, said he wanted to do something real. Together, we launched a new product line, Veterans Reserve Honey, and pledged 10% of all sales to support trauma recovery programs for soldiers returning from deployment. One morning, while stacking jars for shipment, he turned to me and said, "You know, I used to feel guilty for not standing up for you back then." "You were just a kid," I said. "Yeah," he nodded. "But I want to spend the rest of my life making up for it." "You already have." We bumped fists. No more words needed. And my parents? They tried one last time. A holiday card arrived, no return address, but I recognized my father's handwriting. Inside, just 4 words. "We made a mistake." No apology. No acknowledgement of what they did. Just 4 words. Too little. Too late. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already written my answer in the fields, in the hives, in every jar of honey that left our farm bearing the name Coleman, not Harris. That was my answer. That was my legacy. Sometimes, justice doesn't come with a gavel. Sometimes, it comes with quiet mornings and the hum of bees. With rebuilding, not for revenge, but for truth. And with knowing that while they tried to break you, you became something they could never own. I'm Lincoln Coleman. A soldier. A son. A survivor. And I'm no one's burden. I never was.